Kevin Kelly. As an advocate, more on the sexual assault side, but really all of gender violence. I've never really thought of myself as a secondary survivor, but it probably would apply to my experiences as well. It started with a friend who disclosed in high school, and that really just showed me how clueless I was to know about sexual assault, and that kind of led me down a path of trying to help her and understand the best ways of doing that, and it all just snowballed on top of that. My interest just kept growing and growing. I was definitely clueless, and I felt very helpless to help her, or at least come to her aid. Fortunately, there were some resources out there, so I definitely focused on trying to learn as much as I could. She was very much in the early stages of dealing with it. Her assault had happened just a few days prior to her telling me, so she was in the process of going through the medical treatment and then also just processing everything. It was more, I wanted to make sure that I was saying the right things and not saying anything that would be accusatory or anything like that. I wanted to make sure that the information I had and my thought process on it was going to be as helpful and supportive as it could be. I have, yeah. I've had one partner who disclosed fairly early on in the relationship that she was a survivor. Yeah, there was definitely some difficult times at the beginning with me and Allie. Right at the beginning of our relationship was also when she was beginning to identify as a survivor and really come to terms with her assault and really wanted to start dealing with that. She was dealing with some significant symptoms of what she would eventually find out was PTSD. So working through those things, flashbacks, night terrors, those sorts of things was definitely a process. But she handled it really well. She was very brave and really sought out the right help. It wasn't terribly difficult on my end to advocate for. I really just needed to be supportive. Obviously, it was very difficult to see her going through all these things. But in terms of strain on the relationship, it really wasn't bad outside of seeing her in so much pain and really struggling to get through everything. It's still something I'm very aware of. At the time, I did not know what would trigger her, and neither did she. So it was kind of a really difficult learning process of, okay, touching you this way, saying something like this, being in this social situation, these lead to flashbacks or just any type of trigger that makes her feel uncomfortable. So now that we're 4 years down the road from that, it's become a lot easier. I know what things may trigger her, and she has a much better handle on those things. So at the beginning, it was very much a learning process for the both of us. I think sexual assault needs what I would describe as a paradigm shift in its approach. I think crisis centers are hugely important, but there's been too much of an emphasis on them and not enough of an emphasis on prevention. I really think that just like in any crime, you should be holding perpetrators accountable, not survivors. Obviously, we live in a society where victim blaming is kind of the starting point of sexual assault after it's occurred, and it would be much better to just focus on stopping perpetrators from perpetrating the crime. Yeah, victim blaming to me anyways just means putting the blame on the survivor rather than the perpetrator. The classics are always, she was too drunk, she was wearing something slutty, she brought this on herself, she didn't really say no, she didn't fight back. Anything where you are putting the responsibility on the survivor or just on women in general to stop sexual assault, that really to me is not fair at all. It's not their responsibility to ensure their safety when they're in a social situation or with somebody they care about, or just walking down the street. You wouldn't blame a survivor of somebody who tried to murder them. You would blame the murderer or the attempted murder. It should be the same thing with sexual assault. Fortunately, there's a lot of well-meaning people and systems out there. I just feel that they're lacking. I feel that we could do a much better job in supporting survivors and also working to prevent it. I really feel like that is just an aspect that's totally lacking in our society. We've just accepted the fact that sexual assault will happen, boys will be boys, and that they're going to act like this. So the current model of prevention is, again, putting the responsibility on survivors. They are tasked with not walking alone at night, knowing self-defense, not drinking too much, not wearing things that could be considered provocative. I would like to see it shift more to a focus on the perpetrators, predominantly men, just because they're predominantly the ones perpetrating. I would like to see things focused more on gender identity. I think masculinity plays a huge role in sexual assault. So focusing on being a man does not mean being disrespectful to sexual partners, forcing it upon them, making sure that they are aware that women are every much their equal, I think will have a tremendous impact on rates of sexual assault. So I was on the hotline at Moving to End Sexual Assault. They are the Rape Crisis Center in Boulder, Colorado. The main focus of it was to provide 24-hour crisis intervention. So typically survivors who would be calling would be in some state of crisis or looking for resources. So really all you were doing was helping them kind of calm down. I worked a lot of overnights. I don't have a lot of experience working with male survivors. I think because of social norms, it's pretty rare for men to come forward and identify. I don't believe I ever had one actually while I was on the hotline. Like I said, I think there's just so much shame and guilt forced upon male survivors that it's really difficult for them to come forward even in a confidential setting like that. Don't be ashamed. It's absolutely not your fault that you were sexually assaulted. Again, the responsibility is on the perpetrator, and that there is no shame in seeking support, and that you have every right to be happy, that you should really pursue that if and when you're ready. People, it becomes so second nature to make jokes about sexual assault, gender, anything like that. They'll even start to do it around women, and the potential of triggering a survivor is so great in that situation. I was very lucky to have a few sociology professors who really taught me about the ideas of patriarchy, sexism, feminism, and really piqued my interest in those subjects and taught me a lot about ideas on gender and what it means to be male, female, or anything else. In terms of culture, I'm a huge believer that people see examples, especially in TV and movies and music, that really perpetuate these ideas that it's really not that big of a deal. Rape jokes, things about that really put it in terms of comedy for whatever reason. In terms of friends that I've had, I really think anything that is sexist, misogynistic, I really feel like those things, or perpetuate, I should say, sexual assault, and this rape culture is the current term that people will use for it. I think it's definitely a choice you have to make in your head. My experience is most of my friends know me as that person now who will call them out, and I don't think they avoid it completely in their life, but they will avoid saying things like that around me. And that's not always the best feeling. You don't necessarily want to be that person where people feel like they have to walk on eggshells around. I really feel like that, at the very least, kind of leads by example and shows people that you have respect for women, that you have respect for survivors, and that you're not okay with sexual assault.